Nobody really tried to say, no, you know something? I want to throw a grenade at this. I want to blow it up and just start from scratch. How can we truly treat stroke to truly improve access, make it portable, non-invasive, readily available everywhere? And that's how we looked at it.
You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things. You stayed in MedTech.
With your host, Omar M. Khatib.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Now we have another great stroke episode. You guys got introduced to a lot of really interesting topics in stroke from our first guest, Dr. Mohamed Taleb out of Banner. We talked about the state of stroke a couple of years ago. One of the, I think, top 5 most downloaded YouTube videos on our page. Today, we're joined by another physician and founder, Dr. Ameer Hassan, who I met at the amazing LSI Dana Point event. And he's the founder of a company called Quantosis. You can learn more about them if you go to their website, quantosis.ai. Quant as in Q-U-A-N-T and then A-N-O-S-I-S.ai. Dr. Hassan, great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Well, maybe before we talk about the company and the product and technology you developed, give us a little background on yourself. Like, where did you grow up? How did you end up in medicine and, your training?
Yeah, so actually I grew up in North Jersey. My parents are Egyptian and just really always wanted to be a physician. I had several family members, and my godfather was a plastic surgeon, and everybody always thought I was going that route. And during medical school, I met an amazing human being, Adnan Qureshi. And he, at the time, was the first fully trained interventional neurologist. He had just come to our med school, and the guy was publishing, left and right, really at the forefront of research and technology when it came to the stroke space. And was doing some research with him, fell in love with the space, and decided to literally switch all my fourth year electives and dive headfirst into this new space, which was neuroendovascular. We didn't even have stroke proven yet, right? We were treating stroke like the way cardiologists did 30 years prior. So it was fun times and a great way to fall in love with a specialty, seeing it from the bottom up.
That's amazing. What was something memorable that he told you that kind of stuck with you? So
what was amazing was I had just finished one of my first formal plastics rotations, and I had scrubbed in hundreds of cases prior to that, but it was always focused on the OR. And it was the first time I actually went to the clinic and saw how a real practice works. And I didn't enjoy it. Patients were always complaining. It seemed like nobody was ever happy. And then I'm doing research on the weekends with Dr. Qureshi, and they had an acute stroke. And he's like, hey, do you want to scrub in? And this is before the Mercy device. So before the first FDA-approved device for mechanical thrombectomy. And he goes in there, squirts, some IA, intraarterial lytics, uses a balloon, a snare device. And the next day we go to round on this patient together, and the family gives him a hug, and the patient's moving, and their NI-stroke scale, they were basically plegic, like not moving the right arm and leg, and aphasic, which means they couldn't speak. And then they're speaking, moving everything. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And he told me, I'll never forget. So one of the things that he told me, which stuck with me, and one of the reasons why I ended up in South Texas, is he goes, go where you're needed. And it's really, ever since then, it's just like, I saw the space as it's coming up. Nobody knows what they're doing. It's a little bit of the wild, wild west. And there's going to be so many new technologies and innovation in the space. This is where I would love to be.
That's awesome. I love that. I think, as a clinician, there's always a few key people that you meet and that really inspire you in terms of where you want to go. So, you're still practicing. What happened that made you say that there has to be a better way, and for you to essentially, make your life more difficult by becoming an entrepreneur on top of being a clinician,
It's a great question. And what happened was, I would say it was when I was elected on the SVIN board. So our society was leading this initiative called Mission Thrombectomy. And then I get elected president. And as president, you serve a president-elect term for 2 years before you become president, learn the ropes. And I had, great mentors, great colleagues. And Mission Thrombectomy was our biggest societal effort. And the amount of volunteers, money, sponsorship from all the strategics, Medtronic, Stryker, Microvention, which is now Terumo Neuro, J&J, MedTech, at the time was Cerenovus. All these companies were helping us try to get this message across that We really, truly need to improve mechanical thrombectomy access. And what I saw was my partner, who is originally from Ethiopia. And he decided that after 3 years of working with the Ethiopian government and the medical school where he went to, they wouldn't invest in a biplane suite. So he gets a bunch of us together and says, hey guys, we're going to buy half a biplane. I found a private hospital that's going to buy half, and I'm going to donate 5 years of my time there. And I'm going to just build a program, start training fellows there, and we're going to have the first comprehensive stroke center in a country of 120 million people. And it just, it humbles you so much to see how somebody's willing to give up 90% of his salary, give up everything, move his whole family to make a difference for his country. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. Like, I can't find 50 martyrs like Dr. Techley to go to all the markets in the world that don't have mechanical thrombectomy readily available. So COVID occurs. Dr. Techley is like one of the first patients to get it in Harlingen, Texas. And he's out, and I'm on call for like 7 of the first 8 weeks during the global shutdown. No electives, and hospital's a ghost town because Texas didn't get hit for several months later. So I had all this free time in my hands. So I was like, we have to find a way to democratize stroke. So I started looking at all different ways, whether it's using laser technologies, ultrasound technologies. And I hit a point where I was getting frustrated. I was using a lot of the models and the testing, the methods that I use for Medtronic, Stryker, any of these companies when I test a potential acquisition for them. And I was just getting stuck. Like, if I'm not going to be happy with it, I would never show it to a strategic or a partner. And they know that. That's why they keep coming back to me. They always say, we bring stuff to Ameer to push in, break in, push it to the limit, and then I'll give them good feedback on how to make it better. So then I was talking to my co-founder, who's a very good friend of mine. We've been friends and for 19 years. And he's an AI guy. He worked for Cisco, and then he went and got an MBA, was doing courses at MIT and Harvard, was working for the Smart City Dubai. And he's like, I don't understand. If you're using ultrasound, why do you have to do it through a catheter? Why don't you just do it from outside the skull? And it was like that aha moment. We quickly just, started building prototypes of probes that would penetrate the thinnest part of the bone, the temporal window. And I started looking at different algorithms, different architectural designs of the probes to penetrate bone, looking at frequency, pulse rates, pulses per burst. And then we came up with our first prototype, and I tested it about 18 months later. And it starts breaking up clot. And we're like, oh my God, this is actually working. And since then, obviously a lot's happened, and we can go into details. But it really was to try to improve access to mechanical thrombectomy worldwide, because we know that less than 3% of the world has actual access to large vessel occlusion treatments with mechanical thrombectomy today.
Everybody, quick break. If you're a MedTech CEO or a product leader, you're going to want to listen to this sound. I want you to imagine you're about to have a product launch. You've poured your time, your budget, your reputation into a device you're about to launch. And after all of that effort, your FDA submission, boof, gets rejected because of cybersecurity. This sounds dramatic, but it's actually not. It happens all the time to MedTech companies, especially recently with everything being digitized. This happens so often because MedTech companies treat cybersecurity as a checkbox when it's now a non-negotiable design pillar. The FDA's 2023 guidance didn't suggest cybersecurity, it demanded it. So if you're not ready with threat modeling, penetration testing, SBOM management, incident response, and airtight documentation, you're not launching, period. And here's what most entrepreneurs don't realize. Scrambling to fix these issues last minute can cost over $250,000 and delay your launch by months, which imagine the investment of getting delayed, right? The more you spend time in review limbo with the FDA is lost revenue, lost market share, and lost investor confidence. And yet, so many founders and entrepreneurs I talk to, they still treat cybersecurity as a postscript instead of a strategic advantage. Now, I've held off bringing this to my audience as a topic until now because there just wasn't a MedTech-focused cybersecurity firm that I trusted, and that changed when I found Blue Goat Cyber. They specialize exclusively in MedTech cybersecurity. They've helped companies like bioMaru, Inogen, Natera, along with nimble startups to get to market faster with a 100% FDA success rate. I had the chance to meet the founder, Christian Espinosa, and his story really resonated with me. So after he sold his first cybersecurity company, Alpine Security, Christian actually faced a personal health crisis. He ended up in the hospital, and that moment made him realize how vital and vulnerable medical devices really are because a medical device saved his life.
So he built Blue Goat to serve MedTech CEOs and founders just like you. Whether you're pre-revenue or scaling fast, Blue Goat can offer fixed-free pricing, unlimited retests, and no surprises. This isn't bolt-on security. This is built in from day one. You wouldn't launch a device that hasn't been clinically validated, so why would you risk launching one that's vulnerable to attack? Blue Goat will secure your device, simplify your submission, accelerate your approval, and they'll do it in a way that fits your budget, your timeline, and your team. So here's what I want you to do next. Go to bluegoatcyber.com, schedule a discovery call. They do these amazing calls. They'll do an analysis with you, educate you more, because the cost of waiting could be everything that you've worked for. So that being said, go to bluegoatcyber.com and schedule that call now. Let's get back to the episode. So, and when you look at mechanical thrombectomy, like who are some of the players that are involved there?
So obviously, you know, the 800-pound gorillas are Medtronic and Stryker. They have the stent retrievers like Solitaire and Trevo. They create aspiration catheters. And then you have a lot of the new startup companies like Route 92, Fuse. They're creating these super large bore catheters, these 088 aspiration catheters that can track all the way up to the MCA and then suck the whole clot out. And then, of course, you have Penumbra, J&J MedTech we mentioned earlier, Imperative Care, Capel. There's a lot of companies that have come into this space, which is great, right? Competition truly drives innovation. And I always tell people, like, yeah, Imperative Care might reach the MCA half the time, but if it wasn't for them, we'd never have all these people converting to adapt first and aspiration first technologies, and now have better 088s available from the likes of, you know, Perfuse and Route 92.
Interesting. And you know, like when you look at that space, like why do you think the innovation that you guys essentially decided to go after hasn't really happened?
So the problem is it was so easy to get money to just create a competitor product. So, you know, without naming names, there are these startups who came up with a stent retriever that's similar to Solitaire or Trevo. And then they go raise 30, 40, 50 million. They do a study. Back then, it was very easy to get CE mark. So they'd have all this European data. They show it to the FDA. They do a small single-arm study in the US, and they'd get funded and they'd move forward with commercialization of their developed product. So it was too easy to get money. And since VCs were willing to give it to you, and there's so many acquisitions occurring in the space, it made sense to go with the path of least resistance, which is just improvise on what's already there, whether it's aspiration catheters, balloon guide catheters, you know, stent retrievers. Nobody really tried to say, no, you know something? I want to throw a grenade at this. I want to blow it up and just start from scratch. How can we truly treat stroke to truly improve access, make it portable, non-invasive, readily available everywhere? And that's how we looked at it. We wanted to really innovate and change up the way we're treating stroke.
So when, you know, as a busy clinician, like how did you get started? Like, you know, like tell us a little bit more about Quantosis, because I know it's like very early. You've raised essentially a friends and family seed, and you're in the middle of raising a Series A. How did that all come about?
So great question. I'm lucky. I'm a blessed person, right? So I have, as president-elect, right, I have a network of people that I can just, you know, call, and they usually call me back. I set up quickly 2 Zooms, 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. on the same day. We wanted to do a 2 million safe round, and we ended up with 3.1 million after the second call. We were oversubscribed. And it was just that great feeling like, hey, all your friends believe in you. They believe this is a good idea. And these are the world-renowned stroke specialists, neurointerventionists, neurosurgeons at the top academic centers. So, you know, they're giving you a little bit of validation. Now you got to perform, right? So building a team, finding the right partners, the consulting partners, finding the right regulatory partner. That was the toughest part of that 18-month time window until we were able to build the first prototype. And what's funny is I contacted several ultrasound companies in the United States, and everybody told me, you're crazy. Like, the specifications you've designed here are not possible, because we wanted to have such a small focal area of activity, right, that we're less than half of the diameter of the middle cerebral artery. So we don't want to damage the vessel. We need to be very precise and very small. So everybody told us we were crazy. So actually, Yusuf, my co-founder, was just, you know, Googling, looking for ultrasound companies throughout the world, and finds a company in Germany that's making ultrasound equipment to clean oil off of ships, and, like, you know, cleaning oil, rust and things off of ships and oil rigs. And they had an R&D department that built probes as needed. And the guy who ran their R&D department had his PhD in histotripsy. And it's like the stars aligned. We approached these guys. We're like, hey, we have this design. We showed them our schematics and what we were looking for, right? These are the output measurements we're looking for. And do you think this is possible? And they looked at each other, and typical Germans will look into it, and they get back to us with a structured plan. And of course, being in our space, like you want everything done fast. Like I treat stroke because I love things to go quickly, right? You come in, patient's NIH is 20, they're plegic, aphasic. You go in there, you pull the clot out, and the patient recovers. Like that's the kind of satisfaction, gratification we get from doing what we do. So when they told me, oh, okay, your first prototype will be ready in a year, I'm like, whoa, it's that first step where you're like, it really takes that long. So it was nice to see something new. I had never been on that end of the development before. Like I had worked for years with companies and startups, and literally all the strategics in our space, most of the startups, they come to my lab here. We have 3 biplanes. We'll block one afternoon every single week to test somebody's new product, new device. So I always saw like the end product before design freeze. I've never seen it start from scratch. So that was interesting. And working with a company that had no idea about healthcare and the way they look at the problem was very interesting for us. And we learned a lot. And then once we were able to test that first prototype, it broke up clot. We started calling some of our strategic partners. And, of course, Medtronic was willing to offer flow models for testing. J&J, they have this Neuravi. When they purchased Neuravi, that was a startup out of Galway, they inherited that clot lab. So they would send us the clots, red blood cell rich clots, mixed clots. And we did a lot of testing over the years. And then we got to the point where we could improve the treatment time. Because originally I was looking to treat within 2 minutes. We've actually gotten it down now with our latest prototype, less than 45 seconds. We can treat most MCA clots.
That's amazing. And, histotripsy, for the audience who's like not familiar with it, I mean, the best way I can describe it when you see it in person is that you just see like a little cloud of bubbles that are like vibrating really, really
that
fast.
nucleus bubble activity.
Yeah, and what's interesting, what's exciting about the space is when I just came from the American Urology Association, AUA, right? And so that's a society that Intuitive Surgical like made their big splash on their own, and so it's always been thought that the company that will disrupt an Intuitive would be something that has to do something radically different. So one of the big companies that was like the sort of the talk of the conference was Histosonics, which uses histotripsy. I think their main indication right now is on
Liver tumor.
Liver tumors. Yeah, liver tumors. They had some videos for kidney, which is not like FDA cleared yet, but they were able to kind of talk about that a little bit. But what's interesting is that right after AUA, I think Mass Device or something published an article where supposedly GE and another company might be negotiating a $2.5 billion buyout, right? And so Histosonics has been around for a while, I remember, but as soon as they got their clearance a couple of years ago for this, I was like, man, this is going to be really big. So essentially it's taking similar, not Histosonics technology, but the practice of histotripsy and applying it in strokes, right? And I think the benefit of histotripsy essentially is that you're breaking up the clot without damaging like the endolumen, the endothelial cells of the vessel.
Yes, endothelial cells of the blood vessel, correct.
Yeah. And can you kind of talk a little bit from a pathophysiological, see, I'm accessing my former medical school knowledge. From a pathophysiological standpoint, when you do, let's say, mechanical thrombectomy, you break that up and you can damage those endothelials. Why is that a bad thing? What are some
of course. So great question. So basically when we're using, for example, stent retrievers, we're deploying a stent within the vessel and we're hoping that those stent struts stay within the blood clot, but sometimes they go out to the vessel. Then you're basically just dragging this.
Yeah. And I was going to say, if you can, for the investors who are not familiar, like essentially just think of like a wire with a coil at the end and you just stick it into the vessel. It expands and you just drag it out,
and
right?
You're just dragging the thing out. Very, very archaic idea, right? It's like, wow, are we really doing this in a blood vessel? But it worked. And of course, Swift Prime and other studies proved it was very safe. They had like less than 10% symptomatic hemorrhage rate, which at the time was the best we had seen in any mechanical devices in stroke. And they were opening up blood vessels. So it's great. But yes, we do know that there's some damage going on. Same with contact aspiration. You still are causing some damage to the vessel, whether it's while you're tracking the device up or potentially when you recanalize or when you cross the clot, you might perforate with the wire. So there's so many risks when you're endoluminal, right? We're inside the blood vessel. We could potentially damage with our wire, microcatheter devices, cause dissections, which are just tears in the blood vessel wall. We can cause perforations, hemorrhages. And this is one of the reasons why the DEVO and MEVO space, which is the distal vessels, the middle, medium-sized vessel occlusions, those trials came out negative in ISC just a couple months ago because you're going further out with similar style devices. And those arteries are much smaller, much more fragile. They go around more bends. So what we found was we're causing a little bit more damage than we're benefiting the patient by opening up the clots. And those trials were all negative, basically. Whether you just did medical therapy or actual endovascular mechanical thrombectomy, there was no difference in outcomes.
Interesting. And tell me if this is correct in thinking like this, but one of the things that's been sort of on the public mind recently is the use of statins and cholesterol. And the idea is that, cholesterol usually is at the scene of the crime, but is not the issue. The bigger issue is not necessarily high cholesterol, is that if you have inflammation, et cetera, within your vessel walls, because then you have like little tears and then cholesterol and plaque can build up there. I would imagine, and I don't think anybody did any kind of retrospective study on this because it would hurt them. But when you're doing mechanical thrombectomies and you're dragging things out, you can, I think, logically say that you're inducing tiny micro tears that later on could end up being an issue with forming plaque, because the patients you're doing this in, they're not like me where, or you, where they have they're pretty healthy, they have clean vessels and everything. They have a lot of comorbidities and issues, right? And I feel like you solve one really big issue, but then if the patient's lifestyle and everything doesn't change, 5-10 years, they might end up throwing a clot, and that could have been the perpetrator of it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but nobody's ever been able to directly link them, only because 25% of strokes are recurrent. So it is already common for patient not to listen, not to take their medications, not to change their diet and start exercising, and then they would lead to that would lead to another stroke. Now, to simplify things, though, we know that if there's intracranial stenosis, severe plaque in that territory, yes, sometimes putting a stent retriever there is actually bad, right? You might disrupt that plaque and cause a rupture of the plaque. So that's one of the big advantages, of course, in patient populations like Asians, Hispanics, and Blacks, who have much more ICAD, much more atherosclerotic intracranial disease, using something non-invasive. Right? Being able to treat that clot, not disrupting the plaque, just focus on dislodging, breaking up the clot to make it smaller pieces and getting rid of it.
Hey, let's kind of change it up. How about a quick data question for you? Okay.
Sure.
So we have these amazing partners with LSI and their trusted market intel team, and using my favorite market intel platform, which is Compass by LSI. They show that for global stroke procedures, if you look at the US, Germany, China, all these countries, right? The US has got the second highest CAGR of all countries at 8.4% CAGR on stroke. The only one that's bigger than them is at least from what I can see, is the UK at 9.04. So the reason why I bring that up is that this is not slowing down. How do you sort of see the market opportunity for Quantosis when it comes to, let's say, just the United States and a CAGR at, over 8%?
So one thing I'd want to say is all information you have to take with a grain of salt. And the only reason I would say it's US is, if you look at, 3 to 5 year data, it's probably the US is going to lead. The problem was the UK did not standardize this practice after the 2015 trials. So there were several centers, the majority of centers only treated during the daytime when they had doctors in-house. They wouldn't treat at night. They wouldn't treat, when there's no staff on call. Then they started a 24/7, setup like it is in the rest of the world. Whereas in the US, we've always had that 24/7 comprehensive stroke center model because we have JCO certification, D&V certification, and people wanted to get that. They had to have 24/7 availability, backup teams, backup biplane, always be available to treat 2 strokes if they simultaneously came. Now, from the standpoint of growth, we're still scratching the surface, right? We have less than 10% of all acute ischemic strokes treated in the United States. But if you look at all the patients that do have large vessel occlusion, it's probably 20 to 25%. So we still have a lot to go. Now, if you look at also the rest of the world, There, I think we did this in the circulation paper. Mission Thrombectomy published something. It was called the MT Glass paper, and it looked at mechanical thrombectomy access worldwide. And basically around the world, it was less than 3%. And countries like Australia had great access, Bahrain, because it's very small and centralized, right? The US had great access, but most of the world had very poor mechanical thrombectomy access. And if you broke down the US into specific parts, right? Because Los Angeles has like 37 centers, Houston has several centers, right? But then you look at Montana, might have one. So even throughout the United States, there's significant variability in mechanical thrombectomy access. But back to your initial question, there's only 270 mechanical thrombectomy comprehensive stroke centers, CSCs, we call them, right? So there's less than 300 centers in the United States that actually can treat acute ischemic stroke, aneurysms, all types of neurovascular diseases. If you look at primary stroke centers, there's 2,500 of those. So it's tenfold, right? So that's what's really impressive, is that there's 10 times more primary stroke centers than there are comprehensive stroke centers. But those, they can only give you the IV treatment for stroke. So if we can get the device in those hospitals, they trigger the initial treatment to a large vessel occlusion. And then even if we only end up with 50% recanalization rates, that's 50% of patients that already opened up. And then the other half, yes, they'll still go to comprehensive stroke centers, get their thrombectomy, but you would have saved, there's 800,000 strokes a year. Let's say 200,000 of them are large vessel occlusion. Of those 200,000, you would have saved 100,000 from death and disability. That's 100,000 people a year you'd save from death and disability. So it is significant.
All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a MedTech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale-up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day, and that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Khatib & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. We figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high-impact strategies, of course using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that's just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a known name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore, because you've already wasted it plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now, and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, and I was going to say, I brought up that study real quick. And And so this is just showing essentially what you were just saying, which is
Yes.
it's essentially the global mechanical thrombectomy access that patients have.
Yes.
So even in the U.S., it's not that high. Actually, for some very interesting reason, of all the countries that I'm looking at, there's only one that sort of is in the dark green, which is the highest.
Australia.
Access.
Australia is the best. Yeah.
Why?
It's what they have is they have a great system of hub and spoke model where they have every hospital's like attached very well to a hub, right? So you have these major centers that are doing very high volume, and then every center is connected, well-oiled machine, right? They're reviewing images together. They quickly transport the patients. Whereas it's not as efficient here. You have like, let's say HCA and Tenet, right? They don't get along. So HCA is going to send to its sister hospital instead of a Tenet facility. And then Ascension is going to send to their facility versus going to, a Baptist facility. And that's the problem, right? I think you have much more uniformity in a hub and spoke model in stroke triage in Australia compared to the United States. But we're still pretty dark green. Like, look at the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is the opportunity for you guys. Like, I think every medtech company, investors want to see traction in the United States, for a variety of reasons. But after the U.S., in terms of like global access and everything, there's just so much that can be done. I mean, Africa is one place, all of South America. When it comes to and I'm sure actually it might be in this study, so I need to just check. But like in terms of like thrombectomy and stroke, like what is the? Let me see. I'm scrolling in the study, but maybe I should just ask the expert. Is there a certain continent that has more stroke than other places?
Yes. So unfortunately, if you look at it as a per capita, yes, there are areas that have much more stroke per capita than others. So the problem with that data is some countries don't actually check for accuracy.
And reporting is another issue.
Reporting is another issue, right? So in your low income and very low income countries, you have much lower reporting. But no, for example, like in China and Japan, yes, the incidence is much higher than here. And on top of that, they have a much higher rate of intracranial atherosclerotic disease. So they have intracranial stenosis, which is another problem, right? Then you do mechanical thrombectomy, and then you need to put a stent later, put the patients on dual antiplatelet therapy, and that's a whole other rabbit hole that I love, by the way. Like, we've been writing a lot of papers on novel ways of treating intracranial atherosclerotic disease because my patient population here in South Texas is 85% Mexican American, and they have a very high incidence of intracranial stenosis compared to the rest of the United States. So we have been trying to find novel solutions because there's only one FDA-approved product for this, and it's a HDE device.
So for Quantosis, for your actual technology, you're essentially hedging on the combination of AI for better localization and visualization, and then histotripsy for better plaque elimination. That's going to be just safer for the vessel wall, and combining those two together. Is that correct?
Basically, the key is early diagnosis, right, on the field. Like in my mind, yes, in 5 years, we're commercializing to primary stroke centers, urgent cares, comprehensive stroke centers. And you're significantly decreasing that onset to treatment time. Because in the United States, it's average about 5.8 hours that you'll go to a primary center first, then go to a hub, like a comprehensive center. Versus if you come into a comprehensive center, the average treatment time from onset's around 3.5 hours. If I then can decrease that time to less than an hour, and in my mind, 10 years from now, it's not only at urgent cares and primary stroke centers, it's on every ambulance, right? This is like a defibrillator. It's on every ambulance. Patient's got a stroke, they call 911, they go there, they put it on, it scans the middle cerebral artery, diagnoses large vessel occlusion, and then hits the clot with histotripsy. And then that patient quickly recovers, is not going to be disabled, and is most likely not going to die, right? It's in the US, it's the number 5 killer stroke, but around the world, it's still the number 2 killer.
Interesting. So, going back to the tech, like one thing that you guys talk about, and again, you can't show much on the website because you're still early stage, but you talk about the idea of using or doing this treatment through safe rays from a head-mounted helmet. Can you expand a little bit on that?
So basically the original idea was that it would be a helmet that would be placed but we've changed from that. Basically, patients will be, in our early studies, our first-in-man trial and the pivotal trial, they're designed so that patients would be confirmed with CT angiogram, CT perfusion, just like they are at every primary and comprehensive stroke center today. Then most comprehensive stroke centers do intubate patients for mechanical thrombectomy. They request general anesthesia. So then the patient gets intubated and sent to cath lab. What we're going to do is then, it's a system, and I don't know if I can show a video or not, but I can show you the animation of it.
I would love that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I
Hold
don't
on.
know. I don't know if your system will allow you to share screen. Try sharing screen. If not, like maybe I don't know if you
Yeah.
can email it to me or I can
Yeah.
pull it
Okay.
up.
I could definitely email it to you. So then what I'll
And
describe is like,
this is how the show works.
yeah.
Here's me signing my friend DA.
So
Yeah.
basically, imagine like a computer on wheels comes out, and then there's this little tower on the bottom. That's the power generator, and then you're going to have these two probes that have a TCD probe through the histotripsy probes. And the idea is ipsilateral and contralateral probes. And your head is resting, right? Your head is resting, and then these two probes just come up, and they're on the temporal window, right? This is the temporal window. It's the thinnest part of your skull. And it's a straight shot to the middle cerebral artery. So TCD, the nurse is literally going to have to push two buttons. One button that says initiate scan, and it will scan the middle cerebral artery. Then it will say clot located. Then she'll activate the histotripsy, and the button will say like remove clot. And then the histotripsy will hit that side that has the clot. And then basically that nuclear bubble activity breaks up the clot to pieces that are 250 microns or less. And this whole thing occurs in 45 seconds. And the current system is set up where it will scan, treat once with one cycle, then scan again. Did the clot move? Did we make an M1 clot, a distal M1, or maybe a proximal M2? Is it still the same location? Then do a second cycle. So it would only be 2 cycles. And I believe, we'll probably get around 70% recanalization of the middle cerebral artery based on the testing we've been doing. So 70% of the time you can open up an M1 with a non-invasive portable technology that literally has 2 buttons on it.
Got it. Interesting. And on the AI side, like how's that being essentially applied? I would imagine since you're using ultrasound, you're gonna be leveraging like I guess computer visualization.
Yeah. So the whole idea is it's very basic AI in order to look for specific signals that we know based on several papers that have been written over decades that transcranial Doppler can help you locate the proximal end of a middle cerebral artery occlusion. So it's just scanning with the TCD, and once it scans, it stores that X, Y, and Z data point, and then targets the histotripsy to that point.
Got it. And it seems like what a lot of this technology already exists, so there's not a whole lot of R&D dollars that need to be going into this. It's just essentially putting these things together and making them work. Is that correct?
Well, no, not really, because nobody's ever been able to make histotripsy work through bone. So that's our secret sauce. Our secret sauce is a unique architectural design with multiple probes within each probe. And then, of course, the frequency pulses per burst that allows us to penetrate bone. So that's never been done before. Nobody's ever been able to do it. 1, 2, we actually break up a clot in a unique way so that you're breaking off pieces. Some of the early papers that were written in the early 2000s about histotripsy for potential DVT treatment, it's almost like they hit it so hard that it shatters into pieces. And you can't do that in the middle cerebral artery. 1, you could potentially damage the vessel. 2, you want small pieces to continue to break off. So imagine shearing a clot 1,000 times a second. Just taking a piece off that's 250 microns until you get to nothing. That's the whole idea of what we're doing. So yes, a lot of money, basically all the money went into R&D that we've raised so far. And now the idea is to finalize that commercial ready version, with a contract manufacturer, do the GLP study this fall with that device, and then first in man in 2026.
And on the R&D side, do you have like a CRO or something that's helping you with that, or it wouldn't be, I guess, a CRO. Do you have your internal R&D? How are you managing that?
So we basically have significant number of consultants on engineering side, research side, clinical, as well as benchtop research to help us with all of the tests that we've been doing with supplying the FDA more data. We just again had a Q pre-sub called December 10th. where they wanted, based on the previous call, they wanted to make sure that there's no damage in the pathway. So before they would kind of give the blessing on the GLP study, what kind of data do you have? So we did this pork tenderloin test just to show that there's no heat signal, no damage to any cells. We did it at 400% power, and we did 10 cycles, like something that you'd never do in a human. Like the system is going to maximum do 2 cycles at 100%. So we maximized the power, by 400%, hit it with 10 cycles, and showed that there's no damage in the path. So this is some of the safety data. And then, of course, we did porcine carotids, where we put clots in pig carotids because it's similar to the diameter of a middle cerebral artery, and we had complete recanalization with no damage to the blood vessel. So that's the data that we submitted in December. And then they came back and said, okay, could you repeat that tenderloin test with a pediatric porcine model? So now we're going to do a baby pig brain and then show that there's no damage in the pathway.
Why are they wanting you to do it in the pediatric model when stroke carriers is not
because
gonna
the
be...
skull thickness, because pig skulls are way too thick. And so if we did it in an adult pig, nothing would penetrate. So with the baby pig, it's still a thinner skull. And then the whole idea is to show that when you go through a brain and target something inside the skull cavity, that you're not damaging anything in the pathway. So I think it's great, right? For us, it just solidifies that we're not causing any damage in the path, and we're okay with that. So we're actually shipping the latest device from Germany to Jacobs Institute, and they're doing our testing for us. And then hopefully set up, in 75, 90 days, set up our Q pre-sub again and get the blessing for our GLP design.
Interesting. I kind of want to get a little technical with you on something. You mentioned, and I would assume like a lot of your patents are focused on this, that your sort of special sauce here is the way you guys do histotripsy, right? Mm-hmm. Was there a reason why, when it comes to, I guess, plaque morphology and the way you treat stroke, that you chose to use histotripsy versus, let's say, focused ultrasound?
Yes. So again, the idea is you want to keep the device as, I don't want to say as neutral as possible, but as safe as possible. So in our mind, with our unique design, to penetrate bone and to hit clot to the point where you're not scattering everything immediately.
Oh, with focused ultrasound, scatter it?
Exactly.
I see.
And that's why the whole idea was, okay, let's do it with this approach and get the bone penetration we needed, the specific focal points that we need in that range, and then go from there. So we've been pretty lucky in the sense that, the testing's been good and getting us to where we need to be. But now's the challenge, right? It's now you need full-time chief engineer, CTO, COO. We need to build that full-time team. And we've been bootstrapping this thing for 4 years. At this point, we need
capital, and that's a kind of a good and that's a kind of a good next question, which is, it's great you raised a very impressive friends and family round and everything. You're now raising a Series A. When you get that money, how are you thinking about deploying that money?
So basically, the idea is focusing on strategic hires, like I said, right? Full-time engineers, CTO. And then hiring a full-time COO, because me and my co-founder, both of us have full-time jobs. And I'd probably stay, because we have a great advisory board. Several of them are part of startups, like Chris Mancy from Viz.ai, Nadine Haram from Proximy, and another one that shall not be named because she's part of another startup. But she wants to come over basically after she's done with her pivotal trial. So, it aligns very much with what we're planning on, first in human in 2026. By the time we're done with that, submit that data to the FDA. We wouldn't start pivotal till 27, and then probably be doing a Series B at that point to raise money for that multi-center international trial. But yeah, the amount of R&D required and full-time staff members, a first-in-man with getting a CRO, the payments that would need to be done. It's not cheap at all to do trials in the US, right? It's much cheaper to go OUS. And we've thought about that, but like I said earlier, Jacobs Institute is our regulatory partner. They have some bright minds there, and some FDA employees. So they've had great advice for us, and they believe if we follow their GLP model setup for late this year and do our first in man in the US, you have the best chance of going de novo after a medium-sized pivotal trial in the US, versus if you go OUS first in man, then you're probably going to require a series, several trials before you get to commercialization.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because it used to be where, Europe to get CE mark and everything was a little bit easier. I don't want to say easier, but just like that was the thought. Like,
It
hey,
was.
we'll go to Europe,
Yeah.
we'll do things, we'll do trials and everything, get ready, and then we do this big launch in the U.S. And now a lot of because of how bad those regulations have become, it's like, well, you just might as well just go straight to the U.S. I think regulations are important, but at the same time, when you have too much regulations, like it really stifles innovation. I think you see it the most in healthcare because these are really complicated technologies, and it costs a lot of money to do this stuff.
Mhm.
So
Completely agree. Yes. But I think that's why we are staying, like we said earlier, first in man in the US and hoping for a de novo pathway.
well, fantastic. Well, Dr. Hassan, I mean, thanks for coming on the show. But real quick, before we let you go, again, I want to remind the listeners to check out the website. There's not a lot there, but like go check it out. You can read a little bit more on Quantosis.ai. Are you going to be attending any investor conferences this year? Any clinical conferences? That way, if somebody wants to meet up with you, they can.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm flying to Shanghai next week for the WLNC meeting, the World Live Neurovascular Conference. They invited me to present on histotripsy technology and stroke. I just came from iCure a couple of weeks ago in Istanbul. I believe we will have our next presentation at 3C meeting in Jackson Hole, the cerebrovascular complications meeting. They always do like a startups and innovative session. That's end of June. And then, of course, I will be at the World Stroke Organization's meeting in Barcelona in October. And, of course, our meeting, SVIN, which is in Orlando this year, I want to say the Thursday, Friday before Thanksgiving. So we'll be presenting there as well, our latest data. And I'll be at Brain in London with Paul Bogle and his team over there.
Well, Dr. Hassan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to follow you guys along. If you've been listening to this episode and you know an investor in the neurovascular stroke space, forward this on to them. If you know a physician who's interested in stroke, please forward this on to them. This is a way we have a lot of amazing founders and startups get discovered is through you, the audience. Be sure to like and subscribe. Give us 5 stars if you haven't. As always, I'm your host, Omar Khatib, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.